I'm mildly annoyed. I just came back from my walk. I still don't have AC and I've been dealing with the insurance all week so far. But another billionaire CEO is doing an interview and I thought it was a good idea to go over what he said. I'm not covering the whole interview. It's split up into like 10 parts. I don't really care about CNBC that much, but there's some important things we need to touch on because Dr. Evil is back LARPing as a person who's pro working people. The same guy sending all of his celebrity friends into space, the same guy who wanted to destroy a historic bridge so his super yacht could pass through, also the same guy who was leading the AI layoffs. Well, now he's advocating for tax cuts for the bottom 50%. You know, it's funny when people say Luigi Mangione had no effect on the world stage, but before he did what he did, no CEO was coming out talking like this. Before Luigi came into the picture, the gaslight that these CEOs and business types would use was, it's just a free market, bro. Do you really want to punish success by taxing the rich? If I can make $1 billion, then that helps all of society. And while he really hasn't changed his tune, the messaging and the way he's trying to do it has definitely changed. But even with the change in rhetoric, you know that he's essentially calling the government's bluff. Now, there's a lot of problems with this video. I mean, other than it's a billionaire telling you how we should be helping the working class, it's just a amazing job at class deflection. I'm not sure if I'm able to add parts of the interview into the video. I'll try, but he goes on this long spiel about a nurse in New York making $70,000, paying $12,000 in taxes, and that we should cut the 3% tax on the bottom 40% and just have them pay no taxes at all. It makes no sense why the lowest earners are paying $1,000 in taxes a month.
People talk about, making the tax system more progressive. How about we start by having the nurse in Queens not pay taxes? Why is somebody at all?
And on the surface, if you don't really think about it at all, this sounds like it's pro-worker, like this could be a good thing for people. He goes on to say that the government is not really about fixing problems, they're just about putting bandages. I agree on this. I mean, our government spends more money than we collect from taxes a year. We have a huge spending problem. I agree, but why is it when you're talking to a billionaire who owns a company that makes billions, hundreds of billions a year, always talk about someone who's making 80,000, 70,000? And instead of talking the problem that he's actively participating and benefiting from, he paints this picture of a small dog who's getting stomped on, which he does not know the life experience of. Because when you look at who Bezos is, all his criticisms and fixes for the system make absolutely no sense. It's easy to call out a government and say they're ineffective when you know they're not going to change anything behind your words. And while you also actively benefit from that useless government being in place. Amazon has collected more than $4 billion in over 200 different tax subsidy deals with state and local governments, directly benefiting him to the point that when he overworks his employees at the Amazon warehouse and one of them, let's say, has a heat stroke, the ambulances that are dispatched to that warehouse are on taxpayer dollars. That was kind of crazy to think about when I read it. When you call an ambulance, it might cost you anywhere up to $5,000 for the ride from your house or wherever you are to the hospital. But when Amazon calls an ambulance because they overworked their employee who had a heat stroke on their watch, you pay for their costs. And that's just one of the many ways that Amazon is subsidized by state and local governments, because when Amazon comes into a town, it's assumed that they're going to bring all these jobs. But when every single state is giving Amazon tax breaks to move into their state, it doesn't really work so well. It just destroys the competition and gives them an unfair advantage that we don't really see the benefit of. And it doesn't really stop at Amazon. When you check Jeff Bezos's taxable income, on paper, he makes about $80,000 a year. I know people in my personal life who get taxed at a higher rate, and you probably know people in your life that get taxed at a higher rate than him. What he does, just like Elon Musk and a lot of the CEOs do, is they borrow against their shares. They claim a low income, but whenever they need money, they borrow against the company. And this isn't like a new thing. There was a post by Robert Reich when this came out, and it said that the effective tax rate paid by Bezos from 2014 to 2018 was less less than 1%. And for 2025, it went up. I'll give them that. It went up to a whopping 1.4%, while the average American is paying an average of 14.5%. What Jeff Bezos doesn't understand is the slogans and the chants for tax the rich, eat the rich don't come from politicians gaslighting their voters. It comes from voters looking at the system that they're operating in and seeing major flaws. Tax avoidance at this egregious of a level should be considered fraud, and the fact that it's legitimate shows all the problems in our system. And before you say that these loopholes are open to everybody, I promise you Jeff Bezos doesn't know tax code. He pays someone an exorbitant amount of money a year to get him through the tax codes, and many working class people don't have that luxury when they're struggling to afford groceries. And this is exactly another wolf in sheep's clothing, because he's advocating for a tax policy that sounds like it's helping poorer people, but it costs him and his billionaire buddies nothing, changes 0% about how billionaires accumulate and hold wealth, and as the government loses revenue because they're taxing people less, he's just going to use that to justify cutting the programs that these people use to survive even more. And many people never push back on this argument because they're not too fluent on how the tax code works, but any type of stat that someone who is pro cutting taxes, pro billionaire class gives you just shows you how bad our tax system is. When you hear that the rich pay the largest share of taxes, that's true, but no one ever looks at why that's true. As worker wages stayed stagnant, the rich made more money, increasing their tax burden. But when you measure effective tax rates, you can see that a lot of the rich pay less than the average worker. And that's the issue that nobody ever talks about, because the people who lick the boots of the free market enterprise slogans that they hear never look at the actual problems. Our modern system is broken. It's gonna need reform. No one is happy with the current system except Bezos. And eliminating taxes does not benefit the people as much as they try to convince you. Paying taxes is having skin in the game. That is being a part of the system. If the bottom 50% of workers did not pay taxes, I think there would be very huge issues that arise. Because on top of saying you shouldn't tax the bottom 50%, he also goes on to say you shouldn't tax me any more than you already are. Where is this magic money supposed to arise? He says the government is inefficient and has stupid spending in this interview, but then is advocating for more reckless spending with even the lower of a tax base. If he was saying tax me more and take the burden off the people, that's one conversation, but that's never the conversation that's being had. If we pay no taxes, and let's say if Bezos stays at his current tax rate, then every single year he's just going to say, well, I pay 100% of the taxes, I should have lower taxes. We end up in the same situation. Regardless if we pay or we don't pay, he is going to keep trying to slash anything that is taken away from him. This is the same nonsense we've been dealing with for decades. Instead of dealing with the issue that corporations don't get taxed enough, that people avoid paying taxes, that we go and cut taxes at every step of the way, they just move the goalpost to a different tax and tell you to cut that. I'm not really against tax cuts on paper. I can see benefit in them, but if you look at the history of America, you're constantly sold a tax cut that's going to help the working class, but always goes to the top earners. And then you look around your neighborhoods and you see that you have no parks for the kids to go to. The school systems are terrible. The resources are beyond limited, and there's a consistent budget deficit. I agree on not paying taxes to a government that is not respecting its people, but at some point, taxes have to be implemented correctly because that is a huge source of revenue. I'm usually not one to advocate pro-tax, but seeing how America has transformed in the past 20 years or 28 years since I've been alive, cutting taxes at every possible point has really led us down a road of terrible places. We kind of have a reoccurring talk on this channel about the pre-1980s and the post-1980s, post-Volcker era and pre-Volcker era. Before the 1980s, all incomes from the top to the bottom rose at nearly the same place. But then post-1980s, when we started to implement heavy tax cuts, we started to see that median family income went super stagnant, while the top income earners exploded. And the expectation was when corporations get their tax windfalls, they were going to put it into worker pay raises. We all know that didn't happen. They blew it on stock buybacks to inflate the value of their shares. They put it into the CEO pay packages, and they understood that a policy that benefited corporations this heavily gave them free rein to do really whatever they wanted with no pushback. It's been 50 years of tax cuts for the rich, and we've yet to see anything trickle down. And he's so smug about it too. In the interview, he goes on to say,
when you don't know how to solve a problem, create a villain and blame them, but it won't solve a problem.
I mean, in this situation, it would clearly solve the problem, It would clearly make a noticeable difference to everybody's life if you paid your taxes. You could say that a tax code is a burden for low-income workers and it's harder to navigate than it is to use. That's definitely agreeable, but you're not saying that. You're saying that, you know what, we just need to get rid of more taxes. I don't need to pay my fair share. We just need to get rid of more of them. I know we spent a lot on just the first point. There's like a couple more that he made that we have to go over. I promise I won't try to be too long, but it's kind of crazy that he'll just die on the hill that taxing billionaires won't fix it. And in the very next line, he says that buy, borrow, die is not a real thing and the wealthy are not avoiding their responsibilities. If you don't know what BBD is, it's exactly how Bezos and the billionaire class avoid paying taxes. They buy appreciating assets, whether that be stocks, real estate, businesses, whatever else. They will borrow against those assets, meaning that they're taking on debt rather than taking on taxable income. So usually they'll get those loans at a lower interest rate while the assets are still appreciating. And again, very minimal taxes, and they'll just die and pass it on to the next in line. And there is a step up basis, so they never really pay heavy taxes on any of this. You know, they get to avoid capital gains tax and they get to minimize estate tax. Many people do this, not only the billionaires, like this is a very common wealth building strategy, but for Bezos to say, this is not happening, what are you guys talking about, while he actively does this, is just the clearest form of gaslight that they keep trying to do. In this interview, he talks about a teacher in New York, he talks about a nurse in this state. How about we just talk about you? How about we focus on the person in the room and stop deflecting to all these cases, all these one-offs? How about we discuss the earnings and the spending of the guy who is sending celebrities, his favorite friends, into space? This is ridiculous. And I'm not going to spend too much time even talking on this section because this is one of the most documented wealth hoarding strategies ever made. It's so common knowledge. This is just a typical thing that they do. And he bundles in this talking point in the interview with the whole rich people investing makes everyone richer when, like I said, 50 years of tax cuts, yet to see anything trickle down. The only thing that we see is American communities get worse, people's schooling gets worse, people's education levels drop. The kids don't even know how to read nowadays. They don't know how to do math, science, anything. So making the argument that taxing the wealthy will reduce their savings and investment in the country is not really a threat because people are not seeing the outcomes of that today. It's kind of annoying that people use Jeff Bezos as like the man who made it out story. Oh, he was selling books from his garage. Bro, he worked so hard. That was him how many years ago? How about we look at the current modern day supervillain that he's become? He's about as insufferable as Mark Zuckerberg and has the appeal of like the Penguin from Batman. And somehow this guy is claiming, just like Elon Musk, that he could go in the government and cut out all the waste. Like, you're the waste, bro. You don't get it. You're the waste. And you know what? This would just be another interview of a rich billionaire CEO trying to cope and paint the narrative as something that it isn't. But it gets so much worse when the guy who is replacing people with AI at a faster pace than anybody comes out and says, AI won't take your job. Baldy comes out and just dismisses the fear of AI job displacement and predicts that, you know what, it's just gonna help workers in the long run. And you know he's kind of cooked when he's coming out and saying, guys, we shouldn't regulate this. We should just let the technology do what it's gonna do and fix it afterwards. And this is like the catch-22 we find ourselves in the modern day, because do you really want to stop innovation while other countries are also trying to innovate? Like, I'm not living under a rock. I understand China and every other country is trying to race to get AI to be what they want it to be. And if you look at different countries and their sentiment towards AI, it does shift like greatly. I do think there's some propaganda baked into all this. I'm not gonna lie. I hear a lot of people saying that, well, China is super optimistic and they actually really love AI. And I would always just take everything from China with a grain of salt. Everyone says it's not what we picture it as. And I think to a certain extent that is true, but it is definitely not the same society as America. You're definitely gonna get punished for being vocal. Like, I don't think my commentary would be allowed in a China, especially the way I talk about our government. If I did that about their government, I would be persecuted under criminal law and indicted as subversion or separatism. So like I said, take everything with a grain of salt. I do think that a lot of the China headlines coming out now are not true of the average China worker's plight. And while I don't think that they're an iron tiger, I do think that they do gain a lot from being deceptive, and they have a lot of space to be deceptive because they control any and everything that comes out that isn't a leak. So the narrative being painted is that China workers are super pro AI, but in America, it is very clear to see that people are anti-data center and anti-AI integration in the workplace. And a lot of that comes from the fact that you can just search up layoffs on any given day and see that new ones are happening or are pending. It's hard to not believe that AI is going to take your job when it is taking jobs? Like, I don't know how he can say this while he is actively doing this himself. And it's not just the 30,000 jobs that they said they were going to cut between the end of 2025 and January 2026. At the moment of me recording this on the 21st, they announced another round of job cuts and layoffs on the 14th. And it's not because sales are down or profits are stagnant. Profits are rising year after year. The company is doing better year after year. They're using the job cuts and layoffs to justify such a high spending on the AI innovation they're trying to do. And again, he's not the only one. All the tech companies and the billionaires are following right behind him, laying off people at record numbers at uncontrollable paces and telling people, well, pick up the pieces. That's not our job to do it. Again, same billionaires that supported the current administration that is all for gun social programs that people are gonna need in the coming years. I don't know how we can advocate for UBI or any of these things that I hear people talk about when we don't have a taxable base, or we're trying to reduce the size of the taxable base, and we know that the billionaire class that we have is not going to step up to fund that extra cost. And if they do, it comes at a cost of your liberty and your freedom. I am not really for UBI, especially as I work out this theory more in my head. It just seems like a tool to control your mobility in a system that is already against you. If they can give you the money, then they can control how you breathe, eat, sleep, shit, everything. And you know what's worse than a government having power? A bunch of corporations having that power. We had a history of company towns and, corporations that could lead the government to do things. And we had things like the banana wars. It gets dark when the corporations lead the government. That's really all I can say on that. But it gets much darker when the corporations leading the government have an army of robot humanoids that will replace you and will never disagree. Again, Bezos is being so smug on these points and being so gaslighty because he knows that there's not much that's going to happen. No one is willing to call his bluff, and he has enough bootlickers that will agree and parrot his talking points. But the reason he's trying to do it so subtly and advocate for the poor person who's paying too much in taxes is because Luigi struck a nerve in everybody's mind. The worker who set the warehouse on fire struck a nerve in everybody's mind. And unlike other events that fade after a day or two or a week of coverage, these things are lasting in the public conversation longer than expected, making people really think of the system they operate in and how corrupt it's become. Many people may not fault Bezos for playing in such a corrupt system and just operating how he has to succeed, but when you also advocate for your side to get more benefits while people struggle to afford products from your site, it's hard not to view the top earners as villains when they're also not trying to be heroes, let alone even come out and speak against the system that we're operating in. And when they do speak against the government, they do it in the most typical way. Just like Elon Musk, they say, well, we could run the government better. And that's exactly what they want. I've said this before, but a functioning government that taxes its people accordingly, has good measures to stop fraud, and is actively trying to innovate is the nightmare of the top 1%. The politicians we have or want don't need to hate the rich, but they definitely need to hold them accountable. They can't keep dropping on both knees to just service the need of the corporate interest. At some point, they have to grow a backbone and push back. Maybe not let them own the entire country. Maybe not let them consolidate power at rates unseen. Maybe not take the donations they hand you at every single turn. So Bezos is right about one thing in this interview. We have a government that is largely ineffective and doesn't know how to fix the problem at the root, but only plays bandages. I 100% agree. But where he fails is diagnosing the issue and being honest about the situation. It's hard to look in the mirror and take accountability. Many people go their entire lives without doing so, and usually that only affects them and keeps them stagnant. But with Bezos, his failure to take accountability and be honest about the situation and the things that he benefits from are the exact reason that people will turn the torches on him. You don't have to be the evil guy, but when you go and do interviews like this with a syndicated news corporation that's not going to ask any hardball questions and let you go deep on narratives that are just untrue, then you are actively and knowingly fanning the flames that will burn the society that we are trying to hold on to. I should really stop checking the updates on social media. Like I've told you guys, I am off Instagram, I am off TikTok, but there's just something about X that I just have a hard time deleting. And maybe that's going to be my goal for this later half of the year, is get rid of this app, because it is coming a running series that we are just talking about out of touch billionaires and the constant gaslighting that they do. But if you agree or disagree with anything I said in this video, let me know down below in the comments. I do read the comments. Do you think Jeff Bezos is Dr. Evil incarnated, or is cutting taxes even more the right approach? If you haven't already, like and subscribe to join the channel. Every subscription feeds my dog a treat. And with that being said, thank you for tuning in. Until next time.